I've got a brand new printer and I'm getting ready to install it. And that's what this episode's all about. Installing a local printer. What we're talking about here is I've got a printer that's going to be sitting next to my computer, and there's going to be some kind of cable connecting that printer to my machine, a local printer. So, excuse me for a minute while I look at all the fun stuff in here. Now, the first rule of installing a local printer are you're going to have to be using print drivers. Now, you've got three choices on print drivers. Number one, you can use the media that comes with the printer. Number two, you can use the Windows default drivers. And then number three, you can go online and download the latest drivers from whoever the manufacturer might be. Now, for the A+, the rule has always been get the latest drivers. And generally I would agree with that, but in today's versions of Windows, certainly 7, 8, and 10, he's going to update himself pretty much automatically. So my rule is just take the Windows drivers that come when you install the thing, and then if it needs to update, it's going to update itself. So with that attitude in mind, let's watch what happens. Now, I've got my printer physically installed. In this case, what I've got is a USB connection, but the type of physical connection between my computer and my printer doesn't make that big of a difference in terms of these steps. The only exception might be if you have, oh heaven forbid, a parallel connection. Anybody still using those? In those cases, Windows isn't usually as good as being able to automatically find a new device as it would with, say, USB. So with that attitude in mind, let's go ahead and get this guy started, and I'm going to go through the install process. Now, if I've done everything right, I should have a print driver come up and it should show itself in devices and printers, and at least by default I'll be good. But what I'm going to warn you is that a lot of times the media that comes on these particular printers, yeah, it sounds good, has a lot of other features that you would probably want to consider installing. For example, on the Samsung, I know that it's got this guy also does wireless connectivity, so it's got a little wireless utility to help me get this guy wirelessly, not local. We do that in another episode. And it has like a deal for me to buy toner and all kinds of stuff like that. So there is a motivation for me at some point in this process to go ahead and throw this in and install all the other stuff. If I don't like it, I can always uninstall it. All right, he looks good. Hey, looky here. So if you take a look on the screen right here, you'll see that my printer has installed itself. Now, if I right click on this, first of all, you're going to see printing preferences and printer properties. So first of all, let's take a look at printing preferences. Now, for some reason, CompTIA hits on a couple of issues about how to print. So you know what? Let's just go through them. I'm not going to go through every tab here because they're not important, but let me hit the ones that we see as A+ objectives. In particular, you're going to have some basic defaults. So what we're seeing here is the Samsung calls these favorites, and it's basically whatever I'm normally configured to, these are the options I can take. But here's where things get interesting. Number one, make sure you know the difference between portrait and landscape. It's on the A+. So this way is portrait and this way is landscape. Also, you can set your layout type, so you can have lots of different, you can put multiple pages on one piece of paper. They'd be small, but you could do that. Also remember the term duplex. Duplex simply means a printer that prints on both sides of the piece of paper. This little guy doesn't do duplex, but make sure you're aware of the term. I can also select the type of paper I want to use. In this case, this doesn't have trays. A lot of these printers will have multiple trays, and you can actually select the type of paper you want to pull on a per tray basis. On this guy, you're just going to say, what kind of paper am I sticking in the front, so you're ready for it. A lot of these printers have some type of graphics setting. Now, what we're talking about here is two different things. Number one, the dots per inch, and this is a laser, so it can go to very high levels of dot per inch. But if you want it to print fast and you don't want to waste toner, you can actually reduce that. In this particular case, it just says standard and high resolution. On a lot of other printers, you can actually set your DPI. The other thing that comes in is the way the actual fonts are configured. A lot of laser printers in particular will make smaller dots on the edges of a font. It's a nice look. You've seen it 100 times, you just didn't know it was there, but it takes up memory and slows down printing. You can actually change that on just about any printer. Now, you're always going to be seeing some kind of advanced setting. On this one, it's kind of interesting because I can actually put a watermark on there. Oh, that's kind of cool. But the one that I am interested in for the exam right here is collation and print order. So if you're printing a 5-page document, you can sit there and say print page 1, page 1, page 1, page 1. Let's try that again. If you've got a 5-page document and you want to print 5 copies of it, there we go. You can have it print so it prints 5 pages 1, 5 page 2, 5 page 3, 5 page 4, or you can have it print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first copy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 second copy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 third copy. That's what we call collation. So make sure you're familiar with those terms. Okay. Now the other thing I want to show you here, we're going to right click on this guy again, and this time we're going to go to printer properties. So this is really the configuration issues for the printer itself. So we can put in all kinds of stuff here. For example, we can say the location and commentary, and Windows systems would actually be able to bring that information in if you were to share the printer. Sharing, if I want to share the printer, here's where I do it. I say share this printer, and I give it some kind of share name. Be careful with share names on printers. If you're like in our office where we have a lot of the same printer, it's often a real bad idea to use the default names. Try to use some name that's a little bit descriptive, like the printer by Mike's computer or something like that. And the only other thing here is additional drivers. What they're showing you here is that in a Windows environment, if this thing's installed on my computer, I'm using a 64-bit version of Windows. So what we can do is go ahead and install 32-bit versions, not for him, but for anybody who accesses this machine who actually wants to share it, and they're on a 32-bit system, the drivers are there and ready for them. Next is ports. Now, by default, your system is going to take the right port. So if you take a look here as we scroll through, you'll see it says USB 001. It's a USB device. But if you wanted to, you could change ports. There's not a whole lot of call for this like there used to be back in the days. You see all these good old parallel ports here, and heaven forbid, even serial ports. There would be situations where you might have to do some configuration and change a port number, but that's fairly rare. The one place you do see ports being changed is right here. Do you see this? Standard TCP port. What we can do with that is, let's say this guy has a Ethernet connection on him as well. We can actually configure this guy and give him an IP address right here, and then that way people could access him via the network. Now we'd unplug from our machine and then just plug him into the switch like anybody else, but you do have that feature if you need it. So that's the basics of getting the guy configured. What I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install all the drivers, and I'm going to show, well, not only the drivers, but also some of the applications. And let's get an idea of the kind of stuff we'd expect to see on a printer like this. All right, so let's see what this guy wants us to do here. All right, so it's this is a USB connection or a wireless network connection. So in this case, we're doing this as a local install, so I'm just going to do a USB connection. Check my installing network printers for the other way to do it. So it's actually going online, and this is the update I was talking about. So it went up and wanted to see if there was any updating it needed to do. By the way, I actually cheated. I tested this earlier, and this one even had a firmware update. So I had to go through a process of updating the firmware on this thing, which is something you don't do with printers that terribly often. So anyway, it's got a bunch of stuff that I want to install. So there's a printer driver, but easy printer setup, easy wireless setup, printer diagnostics. Be honest with you, I'm not even sure what all these are. I know I can always uninstall them if they're a pain. So I'm going to go ahead and run that installation. Oop, there's an advanced option. Yeah. All that wants to do is where do I install the drivers to and stuff like that. What do I want to call the printer? So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to let that installation go for a little bit. Check back with me in a minute. Let's see what all this stuff is. All right, well, that install is done, so let's see what we get for all that fun effort we put in. So I'm going to have to scroll through here. Let's go to All Apps. It's a Samsung. There it is. So Samsung printer. So what do we get here? Okay. All right, so we get a thing where we can order Samsung supplies. I will probably check that, see if they give you a discount. Otherwise, I'll just delete that particular application. Easy Printer Manager, we'll take a look at that in a second. Wireless setup. If we want to set this up as wireless, we use this tool. Printer diagnostics, if I've got a problem with the printer, that could be a very handy tool. Uninstall all this stuff, and a user's guide. So what I want to do right here is let's go through the Easy Printer Manager, and let's take a look and see what we have here. So this is not a fairly uncommon Printer Manager in particular, and one of the things that you rarely see with default Windows drivers, and one of the motivators of getting a nice updated driver from the manufacturer, is things like how much toner cartridge do you have left. That can be incredibly convenient when you're printing away and then the thing suddenly goes to 0 on you. At least with this you get some kind of clue. So I do like that. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much all it does if you take a look. There's a couple of other little settings here, but for the most part this is really a sales pitch for Samsung. Now, one of the other tools that I do like is the printer diagnostics. Nobody knows the printers as well as the manufacturer, so these built-in diagnostic tools that come with the printer drivers are often extremely convenient when it comes to dealing with particular printer issues. In particular, if this thing has maintenance kits or any kind of little issue, these guys know it and they tend to show you that stuff. So we can see this as a lot more than that. I'm going to run the diagnostic. And that's going to take a while, but the beautiful part to this is that over time, these little diagnostics can really be handy in terms of the fact that they know their own printers. Now the last thing I want to show you, and this is an important one after you've went and installed any printer, and this is really the big test that I do for anything, and that is, let me go ahead and close that. I'm going to go back to devices and printers one more time. And it's right here at the bottom. Do you see that little guy? Print test page. To me, once I install a local printer, the most important job I can do is print a test page. If my printed test page works, I know I've got the thing configured and it's looking good.